You are listening to the Nightline Sports Network, brought to you by Travis Dever and the Dever team, 386-690-1636.
Welcome to the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thank you so much for listening. We'll recap the past weekend and get you set for this weekend's schedule, including our Spotlight Game of the Week, Memphis at SMU. We'll hear from both Frank Murtaugh of the Memphis Flyer and Rich Phillips of the SMU Radio Network. But first, let's tackle this past weekend. In our Spotlight Game of the Week, Tulane went on the road to renew an old rivalry as the Green Wave shook off an early 2-touchdown deficit to win going away against Southern Miss 66-24 in a Battle for the Bell matchup. Tulane finished with 430 rushing yards. Running back Cameron Carroll had 163 yards on 15 carries with 3 touchdowns and a touchdown catch. Running back Stephon Hutterson added 120 yards and a touchdown on 11 carries. The Green Wave also got a spark from freshman quarterback Michael Pratt, came off the bench in the first quarter. He threw for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns while adding a rushing TD in his first career game. Tulane head coach Willie Fritz.
Oh, we didn't start off very good, but I really liked the resolve that our guys showed throughout the ball game. I thought it was I thought we ran the ball as well as we've ever run it since I've been here. I thought the offensive line, did a great job with protection as well. There were some big holes. We had a couple backs over 100 yards. And I think it opened up the passing game. We missed a couple deep balls, and we would have hit those. We really would have had an incredible game throwing the ball as well. Had a couple drops and some deep balls. Defensively, we had some problems at first. Had a hard time getting to the quarterback, and then we just started dominating. And I thought the guys did a super job with their pass rush and playing with leverage and figuring out a few plays that we were having trouble with leverage. So that was good.
SMU, which had opened the season with 2 road victories, got a chance to play in front of a limited home crowd as the Mustangs overwhelmed Stephen F. Austin 50-7 at Gerald J. Ford Stadium. Freshman running back Ulysses Bentley IV ran for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 6 carries. Sophomore running back T.J. McDaniel had 104 rushing yards as well. The defense, 12 tackles for a loss and 4 sacks in holding the Lumberjacks to 216 total yards. SMU were one of 5 teams nationally that are 3-0 in 2020, along with Louisiana, Miami, Pitt, and UTSA. Here's Mustangs head coach Sonny Dykes.
We started fast. That was one of the big things that we wanted to do, was try to get out of the gate fast, and thought we did. And then, we hit a lull where we didn't execute very well on offense for really about a quarter and a half, almost 2 quarters. So obviously we got to get that fixed, but it was good to see once we got some young guys in. We have some really young, talented players, and, they just need some seasoning and experience. And it was good to get those guys in the game and let them play a little bit and have some action and that way we can evaluate them and they can keep getting better. So it's good to see a lot of guys play. I was happy to see that. I thought when Terrence Gibson got in the game, I thought he handled himself well, ran the ball well a couple of times, completed a pass, a couple of passes. And so it was good to get him in. It's one of those deals where, we'd like to get him in and let him execute the offense a little better, but we just didn't get into a great flow on offense with our first group, and we weren't as sharp probably as we needed to be. But it's good to win, and then I thought our guys won conventionally, and I thought defensively, I thought we really played well. We gave up a drive. Other than that, I thought our guys made plays and started to play a little faster and a little bit more confident. So we're going to need to keep getting better. We got a big game this week. Obviously, Memphis coming to town, and we're going to have to play better than we did tonight. But I think our guys are feeling pretty good and have some confidence and are excited about the opportunity Saturday.
Defense was the story at number 14 Cincinnati's win against number 22 Army as the Bearcats won their 15th consecutive game at Nippert Stadium. Cincinnati held Army, which had outscored its first 2 opponents 77-7 without an offensive touchdown, and limited the Black Knights to 182 rushing yards. They had averaged 389 in their first 2 games. It was Cincinnati's second straight game without allowing an offensive TD. That includes last year's Birmingham Bowl. Bearcats head coach Luke Fickell.
Wasn't prepared for an incredibly hard-fought battle. Was sorely mistaken. And I knew it was going to be like that. I didn't exactly know which way, whether we were going to, really play lights out defensively or play lights out offensively. I knew it was going to be a battle. And, I tried to reiterate that all week to our guys. When you play a really good service academy like this, there's nothing that's going to come easy. There's nothing that's going to be taken for granted. There's nothing that's going to be free. And you just got to be willing to work. And if that means you got to work to the last tick on the clock or overtime, that's what we tried to prepare them for. But I do believe that, right now there's not much of a home field advantage, but there still is a little bit of a home field advantage, being here and being comfortable in where we're at, and to have our band and to have our ROTC and some things like that. I think that was something that really I want to thank. I think it was something that means a lot to us and gives us a little bit of pep, and we needed it today.
Number 13 UCS offense was once again eye-popping, while the defense had 4 takeaways in the Knights' victory in Greenville over East Carolina. Quarterback Dylan Gabriel surpassed 400 yards for the second consecutive week, while wide receiver Marlon Williams and wide receiver Jalen Robinson once again had 100-yard receiving games. Gabriel, 32 of 47, 408 yards and 4 touchdowns. Williams had a game-high 13 catches for 136, Robinson 9 for 150 and 2 touchdowns. East Carolina, which was playing its first game of the season, led by quarterback Holton Ahlers, who threw 3 touchdown passes and had 215 passing yards, but they were undone in part by their 4 turnovers. The Knights now have 9 takeaways through 2 games of the season. So as we turn to next weekend's ball games, East Carolina goes back out of conference. They're on the road at Georgia State. Kickoff at noon Saturday on ESPNU. It is the first meeting ever between those 2 schools. Conference game between South Florida and Cincinnati. That'll be a 3:30 kick on ESPN Plus on Saturday. Cincinnati leads the all-time series 10 games to 7 and was victorious in last year's game by a 20-17 score. Navy and Air Force, as that's the first game in the Commander-in-Chief Trophy Series. 6 p.m. Saturday on CBS Sports Network. Air Force leads the all-time series 30-22. Navy won last year's game 34-25. And a conference home opener for UCF as they play host to Tulsa to try to avenge last year's upset in Tulsa. 7:30 Saturday night on ESPN2. Tulsa leads the all-time series 8-3. And as I mentioned, were victorious in last season's game with a 34-31 upset. Coming up next, we'll look at our Spotlight Game of the Week, Memphis at SMU, with 2 interviews. We'll hear from Frank Murtaugh of the Memphis Flyer and Rich Phillips from SMU Radio, when the AAC Report continues in just a moment.
Hey, this is Travis Dever, Kai's Real Estate, the Dever team, New Smyrna Beach. Your source for real estate and everything else New Smyrna Beach. Proud sponsor of Nightline. Call me anytime at 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636. Let me show you my hometown, New Smyrna Beach, UCF's favorite beach. Go Knights and charge on.
An auto accident can change your life forever. At Chad Barr Law, we are raising the bar on what to expect from your personal injury attorney. Hi, I'm Chad Barr, and I want you to know that our entire team is dedicated to providing you with the representation you deserve in your greatest time of need. If you or a loved one have been injured in an auto accident, call 407-599-9036 for a free consultation or visit chadbarlaw.com. At Chad Barr Law, our clients come to us in need and leave as family. Offices, Altamont Springs.
And it is our pleasure once again to welcome back to the AAC Report as we get set for the big weekend in college football, Memphis and SMU. And joining us now from Memphis Magazine, where he's the managing editor. He also covers sports on the Memphis Flyer. Frank Murtaugh is here. Frank, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Jeff. It's great to hear your voice again. It's been a while. Good to be with you.
Yes, it's been a while. I'm glad to have you back on. And have you been keeping safe and keeping well?
Yeah, best I can. My family's healthy. I've got a couple daughters in college, one in St. Louis, one in Connecticut, and knock wood, their campuses are staying healthy. But it's a world where every day is different than the one before, and I've learned to just try and get through each one healthy and as positive as you can. And I think that goes for a lot of college football programs in the country right now, too.
Yeah, one day at a time is certainly the mantra. And, of course, the Tigers have been idle for a little while after they played their one game against Arkansas State. COVID outbreak sets things back there. And I guess it's been just kind of a really topsy-turvy time for Memphis as they've been waiting to get back out on the football field.
It's so strange, Jeff. You consider this is the beginning of the Ryan Silverfield era in Memphis. He's succeeded Mike Norvell, of course, as head coach at the end of last year. Had a debut, unlike most coaches are able to enjoy, in the Cotton Bowl, of all things. And that's followed up with a pandemic. They open up their season on schedule against Arkansas State, but then, the outbreak and 2 postponements, and here we are, getting ready to turn the calendar to October. And he's preparing a team to face a very good, SMU Mustang team with, 28 days of downtime. And you can only speculate at how much, actual prep they've been able to do beyond watching film for this football game. It's nuts. And what a difference 10 months makes, Jeff. Last November, Memphis and SMU played here in the Liberty Bowl, and I've been covering the Tigers for 20 years, and it may be the most memorable game I've attended. ESPN Game Day was here in the morning on Beale Street, and there were 59,000 people in the Liberty Bowl. Amazing game, back and forth. Both teams put up 500 yards, and the Tigers pulled it off 54-48, and it vaulted them toward the AAC championship and ultimately that Cotton Bowl appearance. And here we are, with the rematch. And, if there are fans in the stands, they're going to be few and far between. And we don't really know what to expect from, a Tiger roster that's been compromised, and we don't know how compromised they've been over the last 4 weeks. It's a bizarre time.
Yeah. And, with the COVID outbreak, and of course, the COVID hasn't really discriminated against anybody. Then there have been stories, of course, Arkansas State's been affected, their opponent, early on. So, there's just any number of ways that this could have happened to them. And, fair or not, does it impact, what kind of control Ryan Silverfield has on his team, or is that just not fair?
Yeah, well, I wonder that. I've been operating from my, reporting silo, as most of us are these days, Jeff, and I haven't been able to sit down with Ryan. I know he was good and defensive when the reports about the party bus, the infamous party bus, came out. That the local newspaper, the Commercial Appeal, reported a group of Tigers had been seen, loading into, I guess. What this says about how he's going to message his program and how he's going to manage his roster, that's a tough, that's a tough definition to put out there right now, with the pandemic being one of the variables. And I'm not prepared to cast aspersions, but it's Ryan Silverfield has had the most distinctive start to his career than any football coach in Memphis history. That's for sure, and that would probably apply to most coaches who have started their careers. It's been bizarre, uncomfortable. I've told other people, that have asked publicly and privately, no one wants to have COVID. There is nobody who is cheating to get this. Whether it was a party bus, whether it was something more casual. However it happened, it's an uncomfortable situation we have to deal with, and the health of human beings is the first and biggest priority. And I've been amazed, Jeff, if anything, that football to this point, college football and at the higher level in the NFL, has been so relatively smooth. I mean, we had a situation now with the Tennessee Titans and the Vikings, who played them last week, that may impact the schedule this weekend. But the NFL's been pretty smooth for almost a month. College football, there have been upwards of 20, I think between 20 and 25 cancellations, but there have been a lot more games that have been played, and the best I can tell, rosters are staying healthy. But it's, as I started this conversation, day to day, week to week, check with me next Tuesday. I might have a different story for you.
Yeah, and it could be worse for Memphis. They could be Houston, and they haven't even got to the field yet.
Oh, yeah. Look at that. Yeah, it's misery. I don't know how you even salvage a season there. It's going to be so compressed with the Cougars, and that's one of the biggest home games the Tigers were going to have was Houston, and they've managed to reschedule that game for December 5th, which is typically the week when the AAC holds its championship game, which I know that's going to be a a week or two later if it would involve Memphis or Houston. But yeah, the Cougars, USF gets impacted this week because Notre Dame had some positives. It's the domino effect, or maybe the ripple effect, whichever metaphor you want to use, is just so severe in these times. It's hard to plan week to week.
Yeah, it really is. And of course, lots of campuses have been affected due to the lack of sports and needing the big money from football and things like that to keep their budgets healthy. And many schools have cut back a lot of sports. And at Memphis now, they've had some tough news here recently where they've had to lay a lot of people off. It's got to be just a devastating effect.
Yeah, it really is, Jeff. I've worked, as I said, for 2 decades with some of the people that are now no longer employed in the athletic department at the University of Memphis, and it really, again, it speaks to you in the human terms. You start off with the health and medical impact of this horrific pandemic we're all wrestling with, and then you get to the economic side of things, and the University of Alabama's football program, Jeff, pulls in almost twice as much money as the entire University of Memphis athletic department over the course of an academic year, over a fiscal year. And so when there's no revenue, particularly from football, whether it's the ticket sales and TV revenue, there are going to be people losing their jobs. It's a really, really sad and uncomfortable place to be right now that I know we all hope we find the finish line soon.
Yeah, I know, like a lot of colleges, dumped a lot of sports pretty early on in the pandemic, and it looks like Memphis was able to hold out a little bit, but I guess it just finally caught up to them.
Yeah. No sports have been axed entirely. I think that's another case where I haven't been able to have a conversation with Laird Beach, the athletic director, but who knows what's next? I mean, I work for a small business. I know we don't stay in business if we're not bringing in more dollars than we're spending. Mm-hmm. And that's the math I know, that the uncomfortable math that Laird Beach is doing right now, and it's going to impact small sport, non-revenue sports as they're called, in an adverse way. I think the question right now, Jeff, is just how long it's going to impact them, whether it will be a year or two cancellation, or if this is going to be something that changes the landscape of the NCAA permanently.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we'll have to keep our eye on, and no telling what happens if there's another flare-up or whatever. It could be many more impacts that we haven't even thought of yet. And of course, now the Tigers, at least to this point, are scheduled to play on Saturday, so they've got to strap up and play a football game against a would have been a division opponent last year, but now without no divisions, it's even more impactful, I think, too, because getting behind early in the conference schedule is going to be a little harder. You got more teams to jump over to make things up.
Very good point, Jeff. And SMU is loaded based on what we've seen from their first 3 games. They haven't exactly been playing, giants of the sport, but they're putting up a lot of points. And I'll say this: they have a player with the best name college football has seen in many a year, in Ulysses Bentley IV. I'm looking forward to just hearing his name being called out by the broadcast team Saturday afternoon. It's going to be another shootout. If the Tigers are involved, based on what I've seen the last 6 years, really, there should be a lot of points scored. And Brady White, the Tiger quarterback, he's a PhD candidate. He's in his 6th season of college football with a redshirt year and transfer year, in the mix there. But he's one of the finest signal callers in the sport. So going up against Shane Buechele, if there is a kickoff at 2:30 Saturday, Jeff, and I'll believe it when I see it, then it's going to be one of the games of the week, I believe.
Yeah, and would Brady White still could conceivably come back next year? Do you think he would?
I think that's highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Brady's got some plans. I had a lengthy conversation with Brady in late summer, and he was excited about the season, and he's got an older, wiser man's view on. In terms of perspective on how to handle something like he's now dealing with the cancellations and whatnot, whether or not he'd want to return for more college football at age 23, I guess maybe 24, I think that's unlikely.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, I do have to go off topic just 1 second. I know you're a St. Louis Cardinals fan, and I find it very ironic that the two teams that people thought, oh my God, the baseball season's not going to last a week because the Marlins and the Cardinals both had COVID outbreaks. They end up making the postseason. And your Cardinals knocked my Braves out last year, which I'm still smarting over. But what do you think their chances are?
Well, yeah, they're slim. They're slim, Jeff. But, with this expanded playoff format they have and the best 2 of 3, you and I have watched baseball long enough to know that any team can win 2 out of 3 from any other. It depends on, if your starting pitching shows up. The Cardinals have had good starting pitching this year, even with some injuries. They do not have a batting order that's going to scare anyone. They're not going to win a game, 8-6. They're not going to score 10 runs in the first inning against anybody this year, I'll say. But it's nice, being a Cardinal fan and going through what they went through in August, just having them alive for October baseball. And it's been such a great distraction, Jeff. I would imagine it's the same for you, just to be able to turn on any live sports, even without fans in the stands, during this horrible, plague is what it amounts to. The months of April and May were rigorous with nothing going on. So, the Cardinals and Marlins in particular, having dealt with their outbreaks, you got to root for them. I would hope they'd be considered underdogs. It's hard to call the Cardinals with their 11 World Championships underdogs, but I hope they'll have some people behind them in the coming days.
Well, I'm glad they're not facing us in the first round. That's for sure. After last year,
I think Atlanta's going to be in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
That's a good club.
Yeah, it will be interesting to watch. And of course, SMU and Memphis Saturday, and they get a good time slot on Saturday afternoon. The American has definitely benefited with the lack of Big Ten and Pac-12 schedules, getting some prime spots on the ESPN Family Network. So that's always a good thing.
Oh yeah, I mean the Tigers were there prime time, the opening Saturday night of the season. It was astonishing because I can remember Tiger football in 2010 and 2011, and they would have been laughed if they had begged for a primetime slot on any Saturday night. Yeah, it's a different world.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, Frank Murtaugh from Memphis Magazine and the Memphis Flyer, as always, we do appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. I appreciate it.
And now our scene shifts to Dallas, Texas, where coming up this Saturday, SMU plays host to number 25 Memphis. As we record this on a Tuesday evening, at least for now, the game is still scheduled to be played. And joining us now is the voice of SMU, Rich Phillips. Rich, thanks for being here again.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Well, so far, the game is still scheduled. Memphis has had to sit idle due to a COVID situation. How do you look at this game if it takes place on Saturday with Memphis having been idle for so long? Does that put them at a big disadvantage against the Mustangs, who've got 3 games under their belt?
Well, there's certainly 2 different ways to look at it. There is one that Memphis hasn't had much work. It's Saturday will be 28 days since they played their one and only game, beating Arkansas State. However, Memphis does have the benefit of 3 games worth of tape that they're going to be able to watch from SMU playing here in the early part of the season. So I'm not sure which side is better. I think it's better to have played some games and also been practicing on a regular basis, whereas Memphis hasn't been able to practice very regularly up until we presume this week. So I would think that will be on the SMU side in their favor, but really hard to tell at this point.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the Mustangs are 3-0, one of just a handful of 3-0 teams in college football. Started the season with a 7-point win over Texas State, beat North Texas by 30, and then this past weekend beating Stephen F. Austin by 43. Does the difference in scoring each week, has that truly reflect the progress of the Mustang football program?
Maybe a little bit. It's hard to tell sometimes, too, with the level of competition. Certainly this past week, Stephen F. Austin, they're an FCS school, so certainly a different level there. I thought the North Texas game was a pretty good read, though, for SMU, especially the way their offense played in that game, putting up 65 points, 710 yards. Not that they're going to do that every single week, but it was kind of disappointing, the close score they had in the Texas State game, that I think everybody felt a lot better about things after the North Texas game, that we saw a little bit more of a feel of what the offense should look like this year.
Yeah. And, of course, the great Shane Bichelle returning as the quarterback and continuing to put up tremendous numbers. And, it's interesting that, last year the Memphis SMU game was really the marquee game in the conference last year. Not as much fanfare this season, just based on it being earlier and Memphis not playing, but certainly a big-time college football environment.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I think this is one. Sonny Dykes tried to downplay it with me this week on our weekly radio show, but I think it's one that the players definitely that are back from last year's team have had circled on the schedule for quite some time. They were 8-0 going into that game last year in the top 25. And you mentioned it was a marquee game. It was a Saturday night primetime game. ESPN's College Game Day was in Memphis that day. There was a lot going on for that game last year, and it ended the perfect start for SMU's season. So it's also been 6 straight that SMU has lost to Memphis. So I think guys definitely player-wise have been paying attention to when this game was coming up on the schedule.
Any thoughts on, of course, Memphis is still ranked and they haven't played in a month, and SMU is 3-0, and you would think that they would be sitting somewhere in the rankings. Any extra motivation there for the team?
Well, if they hadn't added those Big Ten and Pac-12 teams that hadn't played yet this week, they might be in the top 25. They were, I think, 28th in the receiving votes category last week, and then they added 5 teams that hadn't played yet this year, since they're going to play, got added into the rankings this year, and SMU slipped down to 31. I don't know how much they're looking at the rankings, and also I don't know for sure if this team deserves to be ranked just when you look at competition they played. Yeah, they've won all 3 of their games, but they beat an FCS school and 2 teams that are we assume they're in a conference below what they are. So they still got some work to do, but certainly a win on Saturday would put them in the conversation of going into the top 25.
Yeah, and we talked about the fact last year was a game day ESPN experience. This year, thankfully, for the American, they've been able to take advantage of the Big Ten and other conferences not playing. Getting a Saturday afternoon time slot on an ESPN network is still a pretty good deal.
Yeah, definitely. This certainly in the first month or so of the season for the American is absolutely the biggest matchup that we have had in the league. And considering that until this past weekend, we hadn't seen a lot of other games. It'd been, maybe 20 games a weekend, I think, until this past weekend. This is one of the bigger ones that's shown up on the schedule so far this season. Some teams kind of dipping their toe in the last couple of weeks with some non-conference games. But this is a pretty big one coming up on Saturday afternoon. Yeah,
and October, kind of a big month. When you stop and think about it, besides this game, got Tulane coming up in a couple of weeks. Tulane can be a handful, as we well know, and Cincinnati coming to town later in the month.
Yeah, Cincinnati, I think, maybe playing as well as just about anybody in the conference right now. And I know Tulane opened all of our eyes when they went down to Hattiesburg last weekend and put 66, I believe it was, on the board. I thought they should have beaten Navy, too, a couple of weeks ago at home. So definitely a big month coming up for SMU. Obviously, they got to take care of it first against Memphis, a team they hadn't beaten in a long time.
Do you think the fact that there are no divisions this year, does that help or hurt SMU's chances?
Hard to say. Probably helps because, you still have that possibility of, all right, you lose to, say, Memphis, who would have been in your division, but you could be second, beat everybody else in the league and give you that shot at the conference championship game. It's kind of odd having only 11 schools playing for a conference championship still, but it's the world that we live in right now. I know that the league's been trying to add somebody else to be a 12 football member, but now that you're allowed to have those conference championships with less than 12, they're still going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and they definitely, the Mustangs would definitely certainly be in the mix as far as contending for the championship. So as you look around the American, you mentioned Cincinnati playing well. What are your thoughts on the rest of the conference?
Certainly, we think UCF's going to be good. They had a big win over Georgia Tech a couple weeks ago. I don't know what kind of a read we got on them against East Carolina last week. It was ECU's first game. Temple, I think, is a big unknown because they're not playing a non-conference schedule. Their first game's not until October 10th, so it's kind of hard to figure out. And then Houston's hard to figure because they haven't played at all yet, even though they had a 4 or 5 games on the schedule, I think. I lose track of how many games that they've lost because of postponements and cancellations due to COVID. But I still expect Houston to be good. Like I said, UCF. And then, I think Saturday between SMU and Memphis could go a long ways towards deciding some things in the league.
Yeah, so what will this week be like as we wait to find out if Memphis is going to be available to play? What are the checkpoints this week as far as that goes?
Obviously it's how many guys they have available. I've not been told specifically what the American has as far as you have to have X number of this position, X number of that position, but I assume it's fairly similar to what some other leagues have had, where you have to have, I don't know, I think it's 4 defensive tackles and, X number of offensive tackles. So a lot of question there as far as who they have available. And it's some with Memphis, I guess, has been guys that tested positive, and then it was quarantine on other guys that were just contact traced. So the biggest thing, that I talked to Sonny Dykes about this week that's tough for them is they don't know who's going to play for Memphis, because it's not like they hand you a list and say, well, these are the guys that are out because of COVID. He said the trainers and the doctors will talk to each other about numbers they have and what they're doing to remedy things, but they don't tell you who it is. So he told me basically they're planning for Brady White at start at quarterback, and then we'll see who else is on the field.
Yeah.
Go from there. But it does make it a little more difficult for them to game plan, just because they don't know 100% who's in and who's out because of the virus. Yeah. Meanwhile, on the SMU side, by the way, they've gone over 5 weeks now without one positive test, which I think is pretty impressive that they've been able to do that. And it says a lot about their players. It's not just the protocol they have while at practice, but their players are doing a lot of the right things too when they're not in practice, just in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah. Do you sense the coaches and players have any misgivings or concerns, with Memphis coming in? They play the football game. This is a team that has had situations with COVID. Do they have concerns there?
I don't think so. They played North Texas a couple of weeks ago, and then on Monday, North Texas announced they had 4 players that had tested positive. And I talked to Coach Dykes, and they weren't concerned at all about it. I mean, they knew a couple of the guys for sure had not played in that game, but I haven't really sensed any reservation from their players going into this game because of this issue. And, like I said, they continue to do their things right so that they're not on that side. Knock on wood, they're not on the wrong side of the COVID issue right now.
So tell me just real quick, besides Shane Bichelle doing what he does, it looks like the running game is certainly on track again this year. And how does the team look defensively?
The running game's been a really pleasant surprise, because they lost 2 seniors that were the primary guys in the backfield a year ago, and they've got a sophomore in T.J. McDaniel, who's been kind of the carrying the bulk of the load. But then Ulysses Bentley, a redshirt freshman, had a huge game with 227 on the ground against North Texas. And he has, I believe, 6 touchdowns in 3 games already this year, so he's been a nice surprise. And then at wide receiver, they lost James Brochet to the Baltimore Ravens in the draft this year, but Reggie Robertson is back. He missed the Memphis game last year because he had suffered a foot injury the week before, but he's back and healthy. And then Danny Gray is a junior college transfer they got from Blinn Junior College, who was rated as the number 2 JUCO wide receiver in the nation. And they were able to snag him away from their crosstown rival at the last minute in recruiting. And boy, his speed is just unbelievable, what we had seen in the early part of the season. So, and up front, by the way, 4 of the 5 starters were all starters last year, so their offensive line is really solid. So they have a lot going right now on the offensive side of the football.
And on the defense?
Defensively was a little bit of a concern coming in. They had 51 sacks last year, which led the nation, and in the first 2 games, they only had 3 sacks. They had 5 this past Saturday by 5 different players. They're running a ton of different guys through in the defensive line for sure. And the secondary, I definitely think the secondary is upgraded this year. Their corners are more seasoned. Both Armani Johnson and Brandon Stevens were first-year starters last year. They're back this year. They have depth at corner. They have depth at safety, too. I really think safety is where they may have made the biggest upgrade on the defense this year, with guys like Chase Cromartie back there and Chevin Callaway, who have really played well in the first few weeks.
Yeah, I tell you what, you raise an interesting point, because to me, I think a team has to be strong in the defensive backfield with the types of quarterbacks you face in this conference. You gotta have ball hawks back there.
You got to be able to cover for sure. There's a lot of guys that can fling it around in this league, starting with both guys that I'm going to see on Saturday afternoon at Ford Stadium. Both those guys can throw it around pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before I let you go, and I have to ask you this because you're in the market, and I am a Cowboys fan, is Cowboys Nation losing their mind over Mike McCarthy's 1-2 start?
They're definitely unsettled about it because they are a ridiculous onside kick away from being 0-3, not just 1-2. So there's definitely some uncertainty about what's going on. What amazes me is there's uncertainty about the quarterback going on too. And I don't know, I watched him on Sunday in Seattle, and I thought he was the best player out there, maybe, Dak Prescott. But definitely unsettled, to say the least. But hey, it's 3 games in. Maybe we can give him a few more weeks.
Yeah. Well, I just love the Overreaction Monday stuff when that comes around. That's for sure. Rich Phillips from the SMU Radio Network, as always, we appreciate you joining us.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Memphis at SMU kicks off 3:30 Saturday on ESPN2. Memphis leads the all-time series 6-3 and won that highly touted contest last season for Western Division supremacy, 54-48 last November. A look at this week's rankings and the Conference Players of the Week. That's coming up on the AAC Report right after this.
Hello, Night Nation. This is Andrew Fagley reminding you to tune in every Tuesday night, 9 to 10 p.m. on WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, plus the WDBO app for Nightline at Night. Brought to you by Chad Bar Law. We'll be taking your calls and your texts reacting to the previous week's UCF sports action, and you never know who will show up. Once again, that's Nightline at Night, every Tuesday, 9 to 10 p.m. on WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, plus the WDBO app. Go Knights and charge on.
Welcome. This is a promo for the Take a Left at Albuquerque podcast, new to the Nightline Sports Network. You should listen to it. I say things like this.
We need to stop blaming Jerry because we would do the exact same thing if we owned the Dallas freaking Cowboys. Do you know how much fun it is to own the Dallas Cowboys?
My guests will say things sometimes like this.
It's the Lord of the Flies thing that happens when they don't understand that things are wrong, spoiler alert, until Piggy dies.
Lord of the Flies has been out for like 100 years. I don't even know.
Sorry to everyone at home who I spoiled the book for. A book's been out for like 90 years or something.
And sometimes, rarely though, I'll say really stupid things like this. If they don't make it out of the West and the Raptors get to the finals, I will go on either this show or whoever's show and say that Kawhi Leonard is overrated because I have too much evidence of it. New episodes drop every Friday with me and some of my good friends right here on the Nightline Sports Network.
Taking a look at how American teams are in this week's college football rankings in the AP poll, UCF moves up to number 11. Cincinnati drops back to 15. Memphis falls to number 25 while being idle once again. The coaches have UCF 12, Cincinnati 15, and Memphis at 24. The Conference Players of the Week. Well, Dylan Gabriel of UCF earns Offensive Player of the Week honors for the second consecutive week after his second straight game with at least 400 passing yards in the Knights' 51-28 win at East Carolina. Again, Gabriel was 32 of 47 for 408 and 4 touchdowns. The first UCF player in program history with back-to-back 400-yard games. And that 4 TD pass barrage as part of a string of 41 straight points for the Knights. And Gabriel set a school record with 18 consecutive completions in the second and third quarters. The Defensive Player of the Week, Jarrell White of Cincinnati. The linebacker was a key player on the Cincinnati defense that held number 22 Army, which had outscored their first 2 opponents by 70 points without an offensive touchdown and held them to only 276 yards, 182 on the ground in that Bearcats victory. White had a game and career high 15 tackles, including 8 solo stops and a tackle for a loss with a quarterback hurry. And again, they held Army 207 yards below its season rushing average. The Special Teams Player of the Week, Daniel Obarski of UCF, he scored 15 points in the Knights' victory at East Carolina. 3 for 3 on field goal attempts, making the first 3 kicks of his career by connecting of 26, 33, and 31 yards, and 6 for 6 on point after touchdowns. And that will conclude this week's edition of the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks for listening.